Today I'm reviewing the Austrian Airlines short-haul economy experience in an attempt to find out how they compare to Europe's other major airlines like British Airways and KLM, and to see if they might just be the best Lufthansa Group airline out there. So join me on this two-part flight from London Heathrow to Vienna in their brand new Airbus A320neo, with a brief 1-hour layover before continuing on to Budapest in an Embraer E195, for what would end up being a slightly stressful but ultimately smooth journey. And you might also be wondering why I chose to fly from London to Budapest via Vienna when there are so many direct flights available. But that's because this was over the Easter weekend and Wizz Air decided to jack up direct flight prices to £250 each way. And that's excluding baggage, so Austrian Airlines surprisingly ended up being less than half the price in this case. We start off at London Heathrow's Terminal 2, by far the best of Heathrow's terminals in my opinion. Opened in 2014, it's the most modern and spacious terminal here, with efficient security, great views and a few decent lounges. My only complaint is that bag drop and bag pickup can be a bit slow, but that's pretty much the case at all Heathrow terminals. The Austrian Airlines bag drop area is right next to the security entrance, but we were carry-on only today, so headed straight through. And thanks to them having new machines and scanners, security only took about 3 minutes. We still had about an hour to wait before boarding, so we checked out the newly refurbished Lufthansa lounge. Obviously this isn't included in an economy ticket, so I won't cover it in detail here, but it was quite nice despite an underwhelming food offering. I was only able to enter for free as a perk of my Amex Platinum card. And I might do a full review of this lounge in the coming weeks, so stay tuned for that. But now it's time to head to the gate, which annoyingly was in the satellite terminal about a 10-minute walk away. Slightly unexpected too, as most short-haul flights in Terminal 2 are from the main terminal building. So after a long walk through the tunnel, we finally made it to the gate. Then, once we actually got to the gate, they announced the flight was overbooked and asked for volunteers to go on the next flight in 6 hours. And the compensation offered was a grand total of €150. Now I had a 1 hour 25-minute connection scheduled in Vienna, so obviously I didn't plan on volunteering, but even if I didn't have a connection, €150 for a 6-hour wait seems a bit stingy to me. At least a few people obviously took the offer though, and we were able to board as usual. And then came my second surprise of the trip: they actually weighed hand luggage. The weight limit was 8 kilograms per bag, and ours magically came in at 7.9 kilograms, so that was pretty lucky.
Stow them in an upright position in the head racks above you. Thank you for your cooperation.
Our seats were 6E and 6F, right near the front, despite us waiting until check-in to pick our seats. The legroom, surprisingly, was really good, even though Aerolopa listed it as only 30 inches of seat pitch. I think that might be in part due to how thin the seats are, which has the downside of meaning they have absolutely no padding. And I've discussed this on my reviews of Lufthansa and Swiss, but for whatever reason, I find Lufthansa Group airlines have some of the hardest seats of any airlines in the world, including budget carriers. And it seems Austrian are no different, the seat feeling like sitting on a wooden bench. But legroom is great, so I guess it's a trade-off. The seats also have USB-A and C sockets. And there's a food menu which actually has a pretty extensive selections, with the main highlights being the whole Wiener Schnitzel with potatoes, but prices were a bit high, with the schnitzel costing €13.80 and a coffee costing €4.90.
Good morning and welcome on board. Our flight is fully booked, therefore we ask you to stay.
There's a lot of traffic today in London Heathrow. Hopefully we can leave the parking position then soon. Flying time 1 hour and 50 minutes. Right now expect on-time arrival. If there is any delay, I keep you updated in due time, especially concerning your possible connecting flights. So right now I'd like to wish you a pleasant stay on board.
As often seems to be the case at Heathrow, we were delayed about 40 minutes on departure due to a combination of traffic and having to wait for some connecting passengers to arrive. This was slightly stressful for me as our layover in Vienna was already quite tight, and I had never connected through Vienna, so I didn't know what to expect. We ended up arriving 15 minutes late in Vienna, then had to wait another 15 minutes for a bus to take us to the terminal, and then had to take another bus to transfer between the terminals, so actually it became even tighter. But we did make it, so that's what matters in the end. Now it's a takeoff out of London Heathrow. in-flight service was a bit of a letdown as they only gave you a cup of water. I always find an airline going the extra effort of serving tea and coffee makes a big difference, but they did at least give us a tasty Lindt Easter bunny, which was nice. I'm not sure if they usually serve Lindt chocolate or whether this was just an Easter special though. Maybe someone can let me know in the comments. Also, here's the toilet. Very small, but clean enough, I guess. As we began our descent into Vienna, the purser helpfully read out people's connecting gates. Then after landing, made sure people with a tight connection got off first for a transfer bus waiting just for them. So I guess moral of the story is that if you have a tight connection, Austrian probably have you covered.
G69, it's quite critical right now, and the decision will be made later if you maybe get a direct transfer if you have to receive a rebooking. So just some more minutes of patience.
Enjoy your Easter weekend here in Vienna. Can we have another track?
Also at this point, I just noticed the plane is called Gesauser, however that's said, which apparently is a national park in Austria. After stepping off the bus, we were deposited in Terminal 1 and thought we had plenty of time, so went to get some food. What we didn't realise though is that our next flight was in Terminal 3, which you need a bus to get to, since even though they look like they're connected on this map, they're actually not. Passport control was rapid though, and the bus only took 5 minutes, and there's no security controls for connecting passengers. But just bear that in mind if you're connecting here, the route might actually take longer than expected. Also, right now we're walking through Terminal 3, and would you believe this is Vienna's newest terminal, built in 2012? Because I almost didn't believe it. It feels straight out of the 90s, dated with low ceilings and no natural light. Also with tiny gate areas and basically nowhere to sit. We were some of the last to arrive at the gate, but luckily it was a bus gate, so that didn't really matter. And our aircraft for this flight was a smaller 14-year-old Embraer E195 with 120 seats. One of my favourite planes to fly on for short regional flights, mainly due to the 2-2 seating layout, which makes it comfier, and means no middle seat. This time our seats were 21A and B, and it was pretty much exactly the same experience. But on the Embraer E195 there's less legroom than the A320neo, but you also get the benefit of the 2-2 seating, which is perfect for a couple. The other main difference on this flight is that it was too short for an in-flight service, so a bottle of water and the same Lindt chocolate bunny were handed out before takeoff. Other than that, it was a pretty short and uneventful flight. If you look at the flight route, we actually took a few twists and turns and had to circle as we waited for a storm to pass over Budapest, but we spent most of the flight in the clouds and I only found out about that afterwards. So for the next 2 minutes, I'll just give a quick overview of how I think Austrian compared to other European airlines, but if you want to skip straight to my final review, then jump to the 11-minute 13-second mark in this video. So Austrian Airlines as a part of the Lufthansa group kind of get overshadowed by the much larger Lufthansa, with Lufthansa calling most of the shots when it comes to fleet, service and branding. But I found Austrian do still keep a fair chunk of their Austrian identity, from things like the classical music which plays on board to the cabin crew, who seem a bit warmer than the Lufthansa crew I've had in the past. But there are still a few signs of the Lufthansa influence, like the ironing board seats and the stingy in-flight service. I think when it comes to Lufthansa Group airlines, Austrian beat Lufthansa and Brussels Airlines, and for me they're tied with Swiss, but that's because I'm a big fan of Swiss. Compared to other European airlines though, I think Austrian are maybe just slightly above average. KLM for example will give you a choice of drinks and a larger snack on a flight like this. Finnair you might get lucky enough to fly on their Airbus A350, and Turkish Airlines, another Star Alliance member, would give you a full meal and a TV to watch. So overall, I would say Austrian Airlines short haul experience is good, but not great. I also think their hub airport Vienna is very average. Passport control was fast, but the terminal feels dated despite actually being quite new. Plus you have to get a bus to transfer between terminals, and there seems to be an abundance of bus gates. Part of that might be fixed when they finish constructing the new concourse connecting the terminals, but for now, it has some issues.
Time here. Thanks for flying with us and goodbye.
So that's pretty much it for this trip report. From my short experience here, Budapest seems like a pretty bad airport. Extremely crowded and a bit confusing to navigate, but the bus to the city was very convenient, and also the Budapest metro and public transport system is great for anyone planning to visit. Now it's time for my final score, so pause here if you want to see my full thoughts. And my score is quite low, but that's mainly a result of it being a short haul flight in Europe. A flight of this length in parts of Asia would give you a full meal, wide body aircraft and a comfier seat with a TV. So I can't really give them a higher score, all things considered. Which means I'm giving Austrian Airlines a 6 out of 10 on my airline tier list. But my return flight with them was in business class, so stay tuned for that video to see if Austrian can earn a higher score. So that's all for today's video. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and thanks for watching, and goodbye.